And Gary Lineker has officially announced that he will be leaving the BBC, leaving BBC Sport, leaving his presenting duties on Match of the Day at the end of this season, following the final episode of Match of the Day on BBC One. Now, in just the last few minutes, Gary Lineker has posted onto his social media his decisions and the reasons why he's left the BBC earlier than expected.
Hi everyone, some personal news. Last week I shared a post here on Instagram that contained an emoji that has awful connotations. Unfortunately, I did not see the emoji. If I had, I would never ever have shared it. The minute I was made aware, I quickly deleted the post and went on to make an apology. I would like once again to say I'm sorry unreservedly for the hurt and upset caused. It was a genuine mistake and oversight, but I should have been more diligent. I know that. I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether and not do next season's FA Cup or World Cup. The final day of the Premier League season on Sunday will be my last show. It's been a pleasure and a huge privilege working with the BBC for 30 years, especially hosting Match of the Day, a programme that is so close to my heart and an integral part of my life. I'd like to thank all of the quite brilliant, talented and lovely people, both in front and behind the camera, that I've worked alongside for 3 decades. You're an absolute best. The relationship with the BBC has been long and wonderful, but it's the right time for the organisation and myself to go our separate ways. Thank you also to all of you for your incredible support and love over so many years. It means the world to me. I'll see you all on Sunday.
Well, Gary Lineker there posted onto his social media, onto his Instagram, with the reasons as to why he has decided to end his working relationship with the BBC following the conclusion of the Premier League season this weekend and his last broadcast on Match of the Day on Sunday, as he said. Let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who's in central London outside the BBC for us. Rob, great to have you with us. So look, Gary Lineker, who was on telly just over the weekend presenting for the BBC, has now said that he will be stepping back and won't work for them after next Sunday.
Yes, Gary Lineker's 3-decade career on the BBC, not ending in the celebration he might have hoped for, but in another scandal. For so long, he'd stretched the boundaries of the BBC's impartiality guidelines, the rules that most of the staff here at New Broadcasting House have to abide by. And just last week, Lineker had said that silence on Gaza is complicity. But even Lineker accepts he crossed the line with that sharing of an Instagram post featuring the rat, a notoriously anti-Semitic Nazi trope. And by also sharing his criticism of Zionism, it's become increasingly problematic, his expression of views on political issues. Now, some might see this as silencing free speech, but in many ways there was concerns that Lineker was perhaps oversimplifying some issues, particularly on the Middle East, very much not seemingly acknowledging some of the Israeli suffering, not discussing the Israeli hostages taken by Hamas, while expressing a lot of concern, along with many parts of the world, over the killings and deaths in Gaza. Now, we have had word from the BBC themselves, the Director General, Tim Davie, saying, Gary has acknowledged the mistake he made. Accordingly, we have agreed he will step back from further presenting after this season. Gary has been a defining voice in BBC coverage for over 2 decades. His passion and knowledge have shaped our sports journalism and earned him the respect of sports fans across the UK and beyond. We want to thank him for his contribution he has made. That in the statement confirming the story we brought to you last night, that Gary Lineker will no longer be continuing his association next season with the BBC, presenting the FA Cup, presenting the Men's World Cup, but leaving after this Sunday's Match of the Day. It had seemed like he was going to be leaving on his own terms last year when he announced that he was able to stay on, still presenting the main live coverage next season while stepping back from Match of the Day. But even that came against the backdrop of so many sources of friction between Lineker and the BBC. It was in 2023 that Match of the Day aired silently after Lineker was suspended for one weekend, having criticised the then Tory government's asylum policy. So many of his fellow commentators and pundits withdrew their services in solidarity. At the time, there was a review of the impartiality guidelines. It still gave Lineker the freedom to talk on political issues, but this seemed to be just one post too far for him, and perhaps quite an unexpected transformation of the career of Gary Lineker as a player with Barcelona, Everton, Tottenham and Leicester, and of course England. He was known as Mr. Nice Guy, but in recent years he found his political voice most notably around the Brexit referendum of 2016, then advocating a second referendum, hoping that Britain stayed in the EU, and then increasingly critical of the Tory government. But how that collided with being the BBC's highest paid presenter caused a lot of discontent here within the BBC. And within the last year, a new boss has arrived at BBC Sport, Alex K. Jelski, who has brought about his own reshaping of the division. And amongst one of his big decisions is the departure of Gary Lineker for Match of the Day, and now Lineker and the BBC choosing to sever ties altogether in terms of his presenting on the corporation.
Indeed, that, Rob. Gary Lineker, described as Mr. Nice Guy by many, because during his professional career, 16 years, never a yellow card nor a red card during that time. But as you say, Rob, once he hung up his boots and had become fully ensconced within his broadcasting career, controversy, certainly for the past few years, seemed to follow him as he made political statements on his social media channels. Now, Gary Lineker has, of course, issued a statement through the BBC. We saw his video that he posted on Instagram. This is what he wrote in a statement that has been posted onto the BBC website. He says, "Football has been at the heart of my life for as long as I can remember, both on the pitch and in the studio. I care deeply about the game and about the work I have done with the BBC over many years. As I've said, I would never consciously repost anything anti-Semitic. It goes against everything I stand for. However, I recognise the error and upset that I caused and reiterate how sorry I am. Stepping back now feels like the responsible course of action." Now, Rob, as reiterated there in his statement and in the video that he posted, Gary Lineker has been at the BBC for many, many years. I think he started on Match of the Day in 1999 and has grown into one of the BBC's most high-profile, highest-paid broadcasters. He reflected in his words about the people that he's worked with over that time. And you were talking, Rob, about back in 2023, when he was taken off air because of that criticism of the Conservative government. He received support from all of his colleagues at the BBC on Match of the Day at that moment for what he'd been saying on social media.
Yes, it was a dramatic few days. He posted on Twitter about his concerns about the then Tory policy's migration policy. He said it had the rhetoric comparable with Nazi Germany in the 1930s. There was an outcry from the government at the time, and then on a Friday night, the BBC stood him down from presenting that weekend. It was followed by so many of his fellow pundits deciding they wouldn't appear on air on a show without Gary Lineker, and it led to the programme airing just with highlights, show it with no commentary at all. Eventually, by the Monday, there was a climb down from the BBC and they agreed to this review of the impartiality guidelines, which Lineker always insisted he was not a staff member, he was not part of the news division, he didn't present any news programmes, so he should be free to be able to express his opinions. But it really set up the battle that has led to this moment, with him just going too far, it would seem, even Lineker accepting himself, with that post which led to calls from anti-racism campaigners that he should be going. And it was the campaign against anti-Semitism that said his position became untenable last week. And the fact we're even here discussing it, the fact Lineker has this status, is really a sign of just what a career he has built and what he's managed to achieve with Match of the Day, a programme that he inherited from Des Lynam in 1999, a Saturday night's highlights programme that many think might have been sort of anachronistic in an era of so much live football, but he really managed to ensure the format had longevity. It was still a point of view on a Saturday night, and many might debate whether they just tune in for the highlights or for Gary Lineker, but he certainly became the accomplished television performer and was there for the biggest moments for the last 25 years, also hosting at World Cups, at Euros, those big moments when England have reached the last two men Euros finals, reaching a World Cup semi-final in 2018. And of course, he's managed to really build this second career, of course, having been so accomplished as a player, the top scorer at the 1986 World Cup in Mexico with England, helping England reach the 1990 World Cup semi-finals as well. And it's the BBC that has actually helped him build this platform for him. It helped him develop as a broadcaster. Even those around him would say he might have been a bit rusty when he started out on radio in 1994. But with that platform, he used it then to become increasingly political, which then became increasingly problematic. And he continued to give interviews about the BBC. Just a few weeks ago, the BBC gave some prime-time airtime for an interview by the Today presenter Amal Rajan with Lineker, in which he was critical of the BBC's Middle East coverage. And he was expressing concern about why a documentary on Gaza was pulled because it had narration by a son of a Hamas official who was calling for it to be put back on the airwaves. So Lineker was increasingly taking on the BBC while being its highest paid presenter. But now we know, as of this weekend, that association, as with the BBC, will end. And it's ending with apologies and scandal over this social media post.